In my opinion, it's still the same framework. If I understand the impact and the jobs to be done, the next question is like, do we have anyone in the organization? And if the answer is no, like then it's okay, great. How do we expand our network to be able to bring those capabilities in-house?
How do you go find senior level roles?
I would say that I lean hard into agency relationships. It is expensive, but not as expensive as making the wrong hire.
Do you love it when people outbound cold to you? Do you resist that? How do you think about those things?
I do, and I would tell you that I'm shocked, and maybe I'm wrong on like how often or how the lack of how often it works or is actually done. I believe in this framework that you have to hire for the team, not necessarily the role.
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow go-to-market talent. I'm Andy, founder of Whispered. Today, I'm joined by Eric Gilpin. Eric is the CRO at G2. Before G2, Eric spent 22 years as a sales leader at career tech at Upwork and CareerBuilder. So if there's somebody who knows how to hire and the technology behind it, it's Eric. And I've loved G2 as well since the first day I found it on a trade show floor, and one of them explained it to me. And so I'm excited to dive in, Eric, to how you hire.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's neat. Well, on one of your other podcasts that you've done, I think you talked a lot about the importance of cross-functional orchestration, decision-making within the go-to-market organization. I'd love to get your take just on how do you get that right so that you can then build a great executive team underneath you?
Yeah, great question. It is probably something I've ranted on numerous times. And I feel like the ego is always in the way. Depending on who you talk to or what event you're at, you'll hear, well, it's product-led growth, or it's marketing-led growth, or it's sales-led growth, or eco-led growth, or event-led growth. And I feel like that is like where everything breaks down. Like the only person that should get credit is the customer. And I think it is like around goal alignment of like, who are we chasing? And I don't mean competitors, but customers. Like how do we like prioritize that across revenue, marketing, product organizations, and understand how we're going to serve them in concert, and think of it more of as an orchestration versus an assembly line. And I think when we start shipping our org chart, as well as our metrics, like that is where customer friction, kind of happens. And so the more that you can drive like absolute clarity at the top of who we're chasing and like what the input metrics of that business are, you typically fall into line a lot faster.
When you think about setting targets and goals, how do you think about like marketing, sales, CS, getting them all on the same page from like a goal, target, philosophical perspective?
Agreed. And I think when you're trying to manage that funnel in isolation, that is where organizations get off the rails. And I think it's like really mapping it back to the entire customer journey.
Yeah.
Starting from awareness, like how you get into the consideration stage. What are we doing kind of pre-sales? What does the contracting process look like? All the way into like early activation, renewal growth strategies. And I think if you're not necessarily understanding that's not one funnel, that's like 30. And so every part of that organization, should have an input metric that is leading to the future and appreciating the lag within that. And so I'll give you the example here at G2. Our sell.dot website is a big part of our, kind of customer activation motion. And so we need to understand what that monthly traffic looks like. Because if you think about our average cycle time of 66 days, and then our speed to lead at 28 days until the op's created, we're always living 90 days in the future. And so if you're not necessarily looking at those conversion metrics across all of those touch points, like you need to be able to see around the corner, good or bad. And I think where organizations fall down is they're thinking about the funnel in different isolations versus looking at the full pitch. And the moment that you can do that in the customer journey, everyone understands the role and job to be done to help customers get through that buying process as quick as possible. And so don't do a pipeline review or forecasting call. Do the whole customer journey review and like, where are you creating value or creating friction on every one of those funnels? And everyone that has an impact on that has to be in that room.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's like that weekly GTM cadence, right? It's not sales coming together or marketing coming together or CS coming together. It's you've got to bring all those people together and they got to be on the same page with the same metrics.
Totally.
That makes sense. What when we talked at the beginning, you said you've since you've been there, you've hired kind of 5 VP plus level roles. How do you go about designing one of those things? And really, what's the work you do before you either call the recruiter or you call your internal recruiting team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like anytime you have a new opening or a new desire to create an opening, it's an exciting opportunity to rethink everything. And I think it starts all the way on this idea of who we were chasing. And what I mean by that is like the customers that we want to serve long term. Um, because I think that like having deep understanding and conviction and clarity on that, it allows you to be very prescriptive in like whatever talent capability that you're trying to bring. And so I think it starts there. I think about role design in two phases. One, impact, meaning like what is the outcome that we want to be able to achieve with this role or the organization that they're leading.
Mm-hmm.
Then two, I love the jobs to be done framework of getting very tactical on like what are the clear things that we need this leader to execute on, and socializing that. I believe in this framework that you have to hire for the team, not necessarily the role. And so if you have really good clarity, Andy, on like what the impact we're trying to achieve is, what the jobs to be done are, the next thing I'm going to ask myself is like, where do I have gaps on capabilities across the entire team?
Yeah.
And so I try to hire not just for subject matter expertise, but like what are one of those like capabilities or traits that would be able to rise the bar for the entire organization? And so do I have enough AI literacy on the team? Do I have enough critical thinking around, leveraging data-driven decisions? Do I have enough emotional intelligence on the customer relationship? And so while I might hire a VP of RevOps that needs to be like super narrow and expert and competent on that kind of engine and glue, they need to have something else that is a gap that's going to be able to help raise the bar for the entire team.
I love that. Does that mean that, a lot of CROs like, great, I'm at the company, let me bring over my head of RevOps, let me bring over my this, but it sounds like you're actually not reflexively doing that. You're saying, would that person, I know 5 people in my network, would that person fit within the GTM leadership team that I'm building? Is that kind of how you think about that?
Totally. I grew up in an organization that there was a ton of internal mobility. Man, it was good and bad. It was great to be able to build your career over, a 15-year plus journey, but it created a ton of groupthink. We didn't have a lot of challenging the status quo. We didn't have access to maybe new skills or capabilities as an organization, and it held us back. And so if you think about the 5 hires, that VP level hires that I've made here at G2 in my first 2 years, only 2 of them had I worked with in the past. I was very intentional in creating kind of diversity of thought and experiences so that we avoided groupthink and that we always had like a fresh set of eyes and perspective on the team.
That's really interesting. I've been at places that have had great internal mobility and ones that have not. Sounds like maybe you've experienced both now too. But how do you have a reflexive approach to that? If I'm always going to look, I guess my reflexive approach is I'm going to look for junior roles internally, but senior roles I'm going to focus on. I'm generally assuming that I'm going to hire those externally. Like, do you have a reflexive approach to that, or how was the experience you had at whether it was Upwork or CareerBuilder? How did that how did you think differently about internal mobility maybe versus other people?
In my opinion, it's still the same framework. If I understand the impact and the jobs to be done, the next question is like, do we have anyone in the organization that meets the needs? Because I do think that internal mobility is important for all the reasons that we could chat about. And if the answer is no, like then it's okay, great. Well, like how do we expand our network to be able to bring those capabilities in-house? And so I think it's the same decision tree. It's like if we don't have the right leader to be able to step up into whatever we're trying to do, then I might have the punch out strategy. Like, okay, great. Well, how do we go build a network folks that would help us do that?
Any best practices you learned on internal mobility that you'd pick up? Like at Box, I think we learned that you almost want to have a different person, almost like a different person recruiting, because you have to handle people in different ways, right? There's different sensitivities. We had another policy, which was when the offer is made internally, we're gonna give a guaranteed 5-week, you must move to the other team because every manager wants to hold them. But I'm curious, any like insights or guidance you've got up for people thinking about like doing internal mobility well?
I mean, I think that you don't want to create hoarding for sure. And so I think you have to get the incentives right. And in go-to-market, we see it all the time, where, the reps want to move up, the managers don't want to lose good reps. And so I think the only way you get ahead of that problem is you have to have an always on funnel. I think if you're reactive in your recruiting process, that is like where those like trade-off friction exists. If you have great choices, like you'll make great choices. And so I feel like, even in sales leadership, if you don't always have 2 or 3 people in your funnel, understanding there are things that you can't control, as well as you want to support internal mobility, you will experience withhold, kind of on that. And so the only way to get ahead of that is pipeline.
I agree. Doesn't extend for the always hiring to like the VP of sales where you've got a bunch of them and you can always have internal mobility and growing high potential people. You can always be interviewing for like those director and down type roles, but how do you approach like always hiring for more senior roles? You were talking about something around hiring customers and building relationships, but how do you think about always hiring when you're talking about a VP plus level role?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if my team appreciates it as much as I do, but like for context, I have 10 directs. All the current roles are filled, but I know who my next 3 are already. And so it's around this idea of like, if you have choices, you'll make choices. I remember an early manager I worked with, his name was Charlie Fisher, and he used to always have 3 names written on the whiteboard in his office, back when we were in office every single day. And I remember early on I joined, and I'm like, who are these names? And he's like, these are my next 3 hires. And so if you don't work out, I already have one that was here. And so I might not display that in a similar way. But Charlie was always ahead of his hiring plan. He was always ahead. Like he didn't have this whole, ramp issue, because he always had a relationship or network ready to go. And so I think about that even today in VP level hires. How am I constantly expanding my network? One of the things I'd shared as we were prepping for this is like, I love recruiting from customers. That is controversial at times. But it's great to see people that already have passion for your brand, the problem that you solve. They understand the application and like why you exist. Man, they hit the ground running as a part of it. The learning curve is, obviously shortened in a big way. And so like I meet with customers. And the best thing about G2 is I get to meet with CROs and CMOs and VPs of marketing and sales all the time. I'm always asking myself, could we work together as a part of it?
I think that is so cool. I will tell you that's like a networking hack on the other side as well, right? Like everyone's always like, how do I get advisory gigs? And I'm like, you just go out to the small group dinner with these people. You give that CRO or CEO feedback on what they're doing. You show interest in their product, right? Like I remember I met Chris at Sendoso and he's like, hey, my team told me you were a really interesting buyer. Like, can I take you out to lunch? He took me out to lunch. He's like, do you want to be on my advisory? I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm happy to do it. And like that just snowballed. And so I feel like a lot of senior level people might stay away from the cabs, the Warrior games, whatever, or the Bulls games in your case. But I kind of say like those are really great opportunities to build real relationships. Like I always say to people, like I'm going to be your worst prospect and your best customer, and I truly mean that. And so I think there's real opportunities to build real friendships there. So it's cool to see how you've done it.
Well, one of my favorite books is called Love is the Killer App. It was written by Tim Sanders, who's ironically our chief innovation officer here at G2. Different story for a different day. But one of the big thesis of his book was like your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
And I agree that if you're CEO of a Fortune 500 organization, that might look very different for you than it would for you or I. But if you're constantly not feeding your mind good stuff and like getting external inputs, you're kind of not growing either. And there's so many benefits: customers, recruiting, learning, access, your own career mobility. And so if you're not out in the wild, figure out what that looks like for you and go do it.
Yeah, it's so passionate about that. Like at some point in your career, you get punched in the face and you've got to figure out how to proactively look versus the other way around. Maybe let's shift over a little bit to, okay, so now you've got the role defined, you know what you need. You talked about like sometimes you use agencies, sometimes you use, I'd be curious, like how do you go find senior level roles?
I would say that I lean hard into agency relationships. But we also have a really strong partnership with our ES team, which stands for employee success. And so they have a talent acquisition arm.
Mhm.
I don't think it's one or the other. They actually have to coexist, and you just have
Yes.
really tight alignment with your people leader on what tool you're going to use, depending on the pool that you're trying to curate from. And I think for a lot of our sellers, as well as I would say like middle management and ICs within marketing and revenue, like we do a really good job on internal sourcing. We do a really good job with employee referrals. But I think as you're thinking about the senior director, VP level, I really like working with agency partners for two reasons. One, a lot of this sourcing work around like making sure you kind of meet the minimum on experiences, compensation, been there, done that, kind of lookalikes. Like a lot of that work is done ahead of time. And so when you're actually talking to candidates, you're not spending as much time on like skill and competency vetting. You're really kind of co-authoring the role together and like learning from each other.
Yeah.
And I think working with strong agency partners, they can take a lot of that off your plate. And so you have like really good at-bats. That would be one. Number two is they're also in the funnel business. And so we all get calls from recruiters all the time. And so not only are they always trying to sell us on a job, but they're also trying to build a relationship with us because that might not be the right fit. And I've found that executive recruiters that do a really good job of relationship building on the candidate side, they can get me into calls faster than maybe I would be able to do myself. They also know about things that are not on the market. And so like, they almost have like the private listing business versus the job board public listing business. And so it is expensive, but not as expensive as making the wrong hire.
I couldn't agree. Those whispered candidates are very valuable. I love it. And we work with about 120 recruiters, big fans.
But you gotta have your corporate and your agency teams working together. Like I'm in a search right now. I'm in a joint Slack room with the agency as well as our internal TA team. And it's not about like who's competing for the work. It's like how do they work together in concert to be able to deliver the end goal. And so if you can create that environment with your partners, which is hard, both internally and externally, I think it's a win-win for everybody and the candidate.
Any favorite exec recruiters out there you want to shout out, give them a little help on their business?
I've worked with a bunch. I would say the most recent success that I've had here at G2 is with a firm headquartered here in Chicago called Hunt Club.
Oh, I know him well. Yeah, Pete is a GTM fund, and I know those guys. To me, Hunt Club is world class at Midwest, and then they do like certain specific verticals that they really know well. So that's really cool.
Totally. My wife is also on their board, so like I would get in trouble if I didn't mention it. So
that is great. How can people find you? I think we talked about the customer advisory side, which is a really great way, which is good. Are there any other unique ways that you are either listening for candidates or people can break through to you? Obviously, they've got to know about the role in the first place, but if they do, do you love it when people outbound cold to you? Do you resist that? How do you think about those things?
I do, and I would tell you that I'm shocked, and maybe I'm wrong on like how often or how the lack of how often it works or is actually done. And so
true, yeah.
I mean, we probably have 20 open roles in our revenue teams today. Most of them I see some sales management stuff.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that I might get one a month of a direct email from someone that's connected the dots of like the role that we're looking for, what we're talking about as a brand, what I'm communicating as an individual and leader to be able to stand out. I think, you're applying into that black hole as a part of it. And I would tell you, everyone that sends a note, some of them are fantastic, some of them aren't great, but I forward it onto the team.
Everyone. Yeah.
Every one of them. But I would tell you, it's like one a month. Maybe across 1,000 applicants we get a month. And so regardless of what role you're looking for, if you're not outbounding, like you're unfortunately not being seen.
It's also what you need to be able to do to be successful within definitely within sales, most likely within CS and probably within marketing as well too.
Totally. But I think that would exist in any function. And we're always looking for application. And so if they can kind of connect the dots, they have the courage to kind of throw themselves out there. Like that's a really good positive sign, regardless if the content of the copy was not exactly what you were looking for. And so I try to find to help them in the process because they've taken the time to try and stand out. It just doesn't happen very much.
It's shocking to me. It's also scary for people to be able to do that outbounding. We talked a little bit before we started recording on process. It sounds like you've really been passionate about the process for the interview. I'd love you to maybe just tell folks about how you look at interview process, and then we can dive deep into a couple areas.
Yeah, I think interview process is like a product, and so it needs to be constantly evolving based on like feedback. And so I could tell you what I have today, and my hope would be is it continues to evolve. And it would be specific to VP level hires and above. And so I tend to have like a 4-step process. And so one, I'm engaging with the agency that is, building a short list kind of based on the impact, jobs to be done, and scope that we've aligned on. And the first call, I want to have just like one-to-one. And it's just a 30-minute chat. And I would say that like this is around relationship building on both sides, because the agency has probably done a good job understanding the technical and skills vetting of what's going on. And so I really want to kind of understand a little bit more about how they think, where they're at in their career journey, how they think about, D2 and what context that they have. But it's definitely a relationship building call where I'm doing discovery. And those questions might look very different and we might go very different places.
Yeah.
But at the end of 30 minutes, I usually have a pretty good insight of like, okay, do I want to continue this conversation?
Agreed.
I think some organizations say, okay, great, we'll like move them to the panel. I don't do that. I immediately go for like call number 2, but I do something very specific where I send a context deck. And it's not because I want them to generate a business case. In fact, I'm very prescriptive. I don't need you to prepare anything. But I think in order to like make the best hires, you got to be transparent all the way kind of through the process. And so it's usually 15 slides of like where we're at, some financial, kind of data that's non-material, or at least not public information. Maybe some of the things we're working on within our V2 Mom or OKRs, but something that gives them a little bit more of like the inner workings of what we're trying to do. I try to have that call like within a week of the first one. And what I do in that next call is just like, hey, I want to understand like how you think. Like I don't need know-it-alls, I need learn-it-alls. And so like what are the things that you're extracting from this? And like what would be the main questions you would have about our business? And it's fascinating what people pick up on. Some of them are obvious and some of them are just like wonderful kind of offshoots that like challenge me to think about it differently. And I'm really trying to deeply understand how they think, what they prioritize, how they make decisions. And usually at the end of that call, I'm ready. Okay, maybe I would like to introduce you to a panel, which is no more than 3 people.
Yep.
Obviously a peer in the organization, someone that they would need to lead, and depending on the role, maybe another member of our leadership team. And we do like a grid scoring kind of feedback. We use our own tools to do that. And my goal is to get to a short list of 2 to 3 within that process. And then usually how I end it, it's not really a problem statement. I mean, I don't like doing the whole business case thing. I actually like building on a part of the context that we kind of surfaced in the second call. And it's almost like a collaboration together. And so is the output like, yes, some ideas and plans or frameworks to think about that problem, but it's usually a very real problem. It's not a made up business case. It's something specifically we're trying to achieve here at G2. And that role would have like a ton of surface area of creating impact. And so we're almost like co-collaborating at the end. We're almost like working together. It also helps me kind of close candidates, like based on the energy and thought that they put into that. And what I've found that this process like usually sticks me with really hard decisions to make. Like I can't think of one. I've always chosen what I think was the best candidate, but it was never like a landslide gap. They were always really close. And I think a lot of it was the vetting process, which is 90 days, of work to kind of get through all of that. But I would much rather figure out the 90 days than figure out like a false start problem and having to go back to it. So I try to stick to that process. 2 calls with me, panel interviews, and then some sort of collab working experience together so that we're actually experiencing some of the things that we'd be doing on day one.
I love it. I've always said like 2 one-on-ones in, I know if I've made the right hire, and I'm learning like, can you manage up? Are you succinct? Are you clear? Can you take control? And I feel like if you can create that process that does that on its own is interesting. So it's not a classic, like, here's a project, go back and present to a panel. Like it's you and them back and forth working on something around the business.
And I'm usually checking in, like if someone is meeting with Preeti, our chief people officer, I'm not going to wait till they finish the panel. I'm going to get some insight from Preeti, but I'm going to text or email the candidate, just be like, tell me what you thought, how'd it go?
Yeah.
And so like, I feel like silence kills all deals. And so I'd much rather have like a step up of communication, especially as we're getting to like the final step.
What's the lift for the candidate on that co-collaboration project for you? Like, do you have an example of one you've given? And like, because I hear so many execs right now, especially when it's a hiring market, are just like, I got that 15 hour, they told me to spend on no max of 2 hours, but I know that if I don't spend at least 15, like this thing won't go well. And it's this huge investment and I've got to do it. We actually had a candidate that did one, sent it, and then the company came back and said, I'm sorry, we're not proceeding. And they're like, what? It sounds like you solved that problem because it's like you and them are doing work, but I'd love you to maybe take a deeper dive of like, give an example of one you did with somebody and kind of the back and forth that you had.
Totally. Well, and I don't write the business case like up front. Like it depends on the candidates and like where we're going. So a recent hire I made, his name is Damian Amaya. He runs our digital and self-serve business. And so G2, massive opportunity to better monetize the long tail of our marketplace, but we haven't really had like I would say streamlined self-serve experiences for SMB customers.
Yep.
And so based on the DNA of the company, we knew we wanted to go externally as a part of that. And so Damian joined us from Active Campaign, where he helped orchestrate all of their self-service journey. And so I already, based on the context deck and what we were looking for, like it was already pretty specific on the capabilities that we wanted to do. And so when we got to the kind of collab of what we were working on, it wasn't like, hey, build us a model. It was like, help us figure out culturally how we change this, because we're going to be disrupting our go-to-market motion. Some people are going to have a lot of passions about that. And so like, what are the keys to winning this culturally, internally, so that we can make the turn on our customer? I never would have wrote that down as a business case if I would have started. I would have been like, hey, build me a 3 to 5 year model and what's the conversion rates in the marketplace and like, what is the product market fit that we're trying to do? And so at the end, we basically created like our walking deck of how we're going to sell this to the sales team. And we ended up using most of it at kickoff, 60 days after he started.
Have you ever, I know candidates always complain of like, they're going to take my work and use it. I always say to people like, that's an immature philosophy. If they do, they do. It's the same thing as like when somebody's raising money and they go to VC and they're like, sign my NDA. And the VC's like, no. And I feel like it's the same thing. But have you ever gotten a circumstance where you've got fairly far down that road, you've done that work? Obviously, that's probably work that's feeding indirectly into your strategy. Do you ever feel bad if you don't hire the person on that side? Or how do you, I mean, it feels so collaborative and they're meeting you and building a relationship with you no matter what. But how do you think about the candidate perspective on that one?
Yeah. So if we get to the kind of collab round, I always let the candidate know that it didn't work out. Like I never like outsourced that to the recruiting agency because you like build relationships before you need them. You never know when that's going to show up again. And a lot of times it wasn't because they did a bad job. It just might have been not the right fit at this time. And so like I try to manage those handoffs in a very empathetic way. I think there has been an experience that I went through last year when we got to that round and the person basically was like, I'm not going to go through that process. I'm great. I don't need to. Oh, and instead of me getting frustrated, it was just all right, great. We're not going to be collaborative. I'd much rather know that now versus like leadership's about doing hard things. And so if we're not going to be able to be flexible now, we're definitely not going to be flexible later. Thank you for sharing that. And I wish you the best.
I love that. It's so true. It's like, I mean, obviously you're doing it with like 1 or 2. Are you doing it with just one candidate or are you doing that with 2 or 3?
Usually two to three at the end.
But different. I think the difference is you're actually spending time with them. Like I had another, I think CRO on and they were like, I want to have you at any moment in time, night or day, like text me because that'll be the way we're going to have our interaction when we're interacting one-on-one. So like treat me like I'm your boss and ping me at any time. And you're going through it in a similar way. It sounds like you've created that, like ask me any question anytime, clarify, maybe you even put them in Slack or something like that.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the more that you can like uncover like your working relationship, it helps you also understand how to set them up for success too. And so I would much rather do all of that work up front. It might be a little slow, but false starts and rehires are hard. And so I would much rather get that out up front to increase your odds. And here's the thing, bad hires will happen. That's okay. It's sitting on them is the problem. And so the more you can get that work done up front, you just increase your odds on both sides. Like you want them to be successful too.
How about references?
I love references, but probably more in the back channel sense. We ask for references as a part of the process, which I think is pretty typical for organizations. But I won't do back channels and I don't wait on back channels. I'm in a search right now. I've already met with 2 candidates the first time. I've not gone to stage 2, but I've already back channeled them both. And I feel like this goes back to that statement around your network's your net worth. And I value back channels in a really meaningful way. And rarely, in my experience, have I not found an in, kind of around that. I'm very transparent with the candidates that like, hey, I'm going to poke around. You should too. And I would encourage you, if you want to learn about me, like do that work. But I'm going to be doing it as a part of the process.
I love that. Do you ever ask them like, hey, are there certain people that are off limits? I've seen in the last week, I've talked to 2 VP/C-level folks that have been at jobs and have been interviewing and have both been blown up by back channels. So like CEO finds out and it turns into a shitstorm. Like, how do you handle that?
I think it's it's kind of a collaboration up front. And obviously, the majority of world-class leaders are usually currently employed. And so I think having that conversation up front of like what's, off limits, and it's a natural expectation that they should expect of, their hiring leader. And so it's good to have like, kind of that transparency. But yeah, I think questions around like anything you want me to avoid, from a research standpoint, it's a great question.
It's a phenomenal question. There's a person that if you ask me anybody you want to avoid, I'd be like, just don't call that person. Like, I didn't respect them. They probably, because of that, didn't respect me. And like, it will be a bad reference.
Yeah. Well, this is why I also love hiring customers, because I can pull up the recording of like any call they've had with our team over the last 2 years and see how they've engaged with our team. And so I get to see them in action. And so Gong is a cheat code for me on recruiting too.
Oh, dude, that's great. How do you think about references with your third party recruiters? It's funny because one of the 2 that got blown up was blown up by a recruiter just like firing every VC out there. And do you just say don't bother, I'll take care of them, or do you still want them to do it?
I want to 100% do them myself for a number of reasons. Like one, I need to hear it. And I want to make sure that I understand the context and be able to poke around in those. And so I don't outsource that to them. And 2, like I don't want a bunch of noise in the market. We ask candidates for references as a part of the process. And we do call those as well. But like I've learned the hard way on back channels, and I won't not do it again.
Like any one of my managers that won't do the back channels, I will have that hard conversation with them and explain them why it's important. It's also why your network matters, right? Because Eric, you probably have a very large network and you can ping people and they'll respond to you. I think these people that are quiet leaders without a network, as they get to be a leader, it's actually harder to do. I think the other interesting thing is the social side. By coming on this podcast, talking about how you hire and think, I think helps it make it easier for you to hire as well.
But the cost of getting it wrong on both sides is it's just not worth it. And so I would much rather do everything I can possible to increase our odds for both, so that we have clarity around expectations and we kind of know with absolute transparency what we're getting into.
I'm sure there are some times where you encounter a bad reference on somebody. Does that shut you down, or does that just mean I need more data points? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'd say data point. When I've had bad references, it's usually validating to something else I've experienced in the process. And so like I take a data point in isolation as a data point, but when you've got like 3 data points, you have a trend. Yeah. And so anytime that I've gotten a back channel that wasn't great, I've been able to connect it to something that wasn't great already, in the process. And I would also say that like back channels can help in a positive way too. Because, maybe there are things I hadn't uncovered yet, or I wasn't thinking about that I learned. And I'm like, oh, wow, that could be like an additional asset that I'm not even thinking about today.
I agree. Back channels can really make people rise. I was talking to a candidate the other day, and they had a 3-year experience and a 1 and a 1. And we'll talk when we stop recording about the 1, because you actually know the CEO. But I was like, you're going to struggle. And they're like, yes, but does it help that my references are X and Y? And I was like, yeah, it does. And I've actually been trying to meet X and Y for a long time. And this person's like, great, I'll send you an email with an intro to both of those people, right? And I guarantee you know both of those people. And I was like, wow, you just rose in my mind, and very impressive.
And everybody's got short tenure right now. I mean, what is average CRO, CMO turnover? Like less than 2 years?
18 months.
Yeah. And so I just celebrated 2 years. And so clock is ticking. We'll see. But and so like, there's always a story in that. Like there is nobody in tech that's not going through some form of transformation. And this is where back channels, to your point, they help rise the candidate in a great way.
I couldn't agree more. We could probably talk for hours, but I just deeply appreciate you taking the time to come and share the wisdom. It's neat to see how deeply you've thought about it, and generally every leader we get on has been like so thoughtful. So thank you so much for taking the time. I'm excited to keep building the friendship.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome, and appreciate you thinking of G2 and me, and it's been awesome to hear some of the other leaders as a part of the podcast.
That's awesome. Thank you.